And now Joe Rogan may be a secret weapon to put the Epstein scandal to bed. The truth about Trump's big balls inspired DC takeover. This journalist just interviewed an AI shooting victim. And what the hell is happening in Sudan right now? We're talking about all of that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. Journalist Jim Acosta just interviewed the AI avatar of a teenager who was killed in the Parkland school shooting in 2018.
More kindness and understanding can truly make a difference. Together, we can create a world where everyone feels safe and supported.
So that is an AI rendering of Joaquin Oliver, and it was created by his parents, Manuel and Patricia. And this week, they allowed Acosta to be the first reporter to interview him in honor of what would have been his 25th birthday. And right off the bat, you had Acosta asking it about gun violence.
I was wondering if you could tell me what happened to you.
I appreciate your curiosity. I was taken from this world too soon due to gun violence while at school. It's important to talk about these issues so we can create a safer future for everyone. What would you like to know more about?
Joaquin, I would like to know what your solution would be for gun violence.
Great question. I believe in a mix of stronger gun control laws, mental health support, and community engagement.
Acosta then starts asking AI Joaquin about his life and hobbies and interests.
Do you have a favorite movie or show?
Oh, I'm a big Star Wars fan for sure.
Star Wars is such an epic saga. The adventures, the characters, and that iconic music are unforgettable.
And then after speaking with the AI, you had Acosta speaking to Joaquin's father.
Also mentioned that I understand that this is AI. I don't want anyone to think that I am in some way trying to bring my son back. It's sadly, I can't. I can hear his voice again, which is something that Patricia loves. And on the other hand, we can just raise our voices and now Joaquin is going to start having followers. It's not Maddie, it's not Patricia. He's going to start uploading videos. This is just the beginning.
But immediately you saw a lot of people saying they were rubbed the wrong way here. With, many saying they're just allowing this AI to speak for the dead when we really have no idea what this person would have said. So there was no shortage of backlash, especially against Acosta, with people saying things like, you don't have an interview. You're facilitating a grotesque puppet show using grieving parents' heartbreak for a bit. And this is so insane and evil, it should never be done. I'm speechless. But then also a professor at the University of California at Berkeley adding, this sort of interview style can't possibly represent what that child wants to say in any reasonable way. There are plenty of opportunities to talk to real victims and have a serious conversation about this epidemic that's happening in our country without resorting to this sort of stunt. Right? And then with that, you had a lot of people debating the journalistic ethics of this, with some saying Joaquin Oliver's death was a tragedy, but animating a dead child to speak words he never said serves no journalistic purpose. All it does is chase clicks by exploiting a kid who can no longer express himself. So then others going further, noting that there are actually other complications in using AI when it comes to grief itself. With, for example, one behavioral scientist writing, there are actual harms associated with so-called grief bots. Some researchers even warn of digital hauntings that prolong grief. With all that, as the criticism was rolling in, you had Acosta writing on Blue Sky that Joaquin's family, quote, approached me to help them remember their son, and he included a video of his father explaining the choice again.
It was our idea, it was our plan, and it's still our plan. We feel that Joaquin has a lot of things to say. If the problem that you have is with the AI, then you have the wrong problem. The real problem is that my son was shot.
That in no way stopped the backlash. You had tons of people arguing, don't weaponize their grief to cover your ass, and dead people can't consent. None of those are his words. So at the same time, on Acosta Substack, you had people thanking him, saying this was a hard watch, but it was clearly an expression of love from Manny towards his beautiful son. Others saying they were close to tears watching that video. So, with all that, I gotta pass the question off to you of what are your thoughts, opinions, and reactions here? And then, next up in the news, a former Doge employee was just attacked in DC, and now you have Donald Trump threatening to take over the entire city. And so, we should talk about what happened, how we got here, and whether Trump's actually allowed to do that. Right, so starting with this Doge worker, his name is Edward Korestein, but he's better known as Big Balls. And despite being just 19 years old, he previously worked as a senior advisor with access to various government agencies, including Homeland Security. He also reportedly played a key role in Doge's dismantling of USAID, and he's now working for the Social Security Administration. But according to police, early Sunday morning, 10 young people assaulted him as part of an attempted carjacking in an upscale Outskill neighborhood less than 2 miles from the White House, with police saying that he was with his significant other and Cory telling officers that he pushed his girlfriend into the car for her own safety and then turned to deal with the suspects before being attacked. You had cops patrolling the area eventually showing up and putting a stop to it, and as of recording, police say they've arrested two 15-year-old suspects, a boy and a girl, both of whom have been charged with unarmed carjacking. And as police continued to search, you had Trump deciding to weigh in, or with Trump sharing a photo that appeared to show Cory sitting in the street, covered in his own blood, writing, "Crime in Washington, D.C. is totally out of control. Local youths and gang members, some only 14, 15, and 16 years old, are randomly attacking, mugging, maiming, and shooting innocent citizens at the same time knowing that they will be almost immediately released." With Trump then going on to say the law in D.C. must be changed to prosecute these minors as adults and lock them up for a long time, starting at age 14. But then with that, as far as Trump's claim about crime being out of control, when you actually look into it, that does not appear to be the case. The city's crime rates, they've actually been falling sharply. In fact, this last January, you had officials announcing that violent crime in the city had reached a 30-year low with a 26% decline this year compared to 2024. But to be fair, I will say, Trump was somewhat near the truth in suggesting that there is an issue with youth crime in particular. But young people, they now make up a majority of the arrests for robbery and carjacking in the city. And in fact, just a few months ago, you had the mayor announcing the creation of a special police unit specifically dedicated to preventing and responding to juvenile crime, which some argue is a better approach than just throwing 14-year-olds in adult prisons. But either way, you then had Trump issuing this warning saying, if DC doesn't get its act together and quickly, we will have no choice but to take federal control of the city and run this city how it should be run and put criminals on notice that they're not going to get away with it anymore. But then, despite their falling out, you had Elon Musk sharing a screenshot of Trump's post, agreeing and writing, "It's time to federalize DC." Now, notably, this is far from the first time that Trump or others have suggested this. You had Trump reportedly considering taking control of the city's police force to deal with protests during his first term. Also on the campaign trail, he vowed to take over what he called the horribly run capital of our nation, so there is no longer a nightmare of murder and crime. And since getting back into office, he's already floated this idea of taking over more than once, not counting this week. And one of the big things is while you have people saying, he can't do that, or at least not technically, the situation, it's more complicated. And if you're just talking about impact, we could see a huge impact here. Because DC has had a limited degree of self-government since what's called the Home Rule Act of 1973. And that means that Trump technically can't just federalize the government. Congress would need to undo what's already done. And if the Republicans, they tried to do that, Democrats would probably be able to block the legislation. And in fact, back in February, 2 Republicans introduced legislation to repeal home rule entirely, which didn't get anywhere. That said, though, it would be a mistake to say that DC is totally safe from federal interference. In fact, Trump, along with Republicans, they've already gotten involved. Or you had Trump signing an executive order to create a federal DC safe and beautiful task force. And then Congress, they passed bills to undo legislation passed by DC's local government. And then, of course, another possibility is that Republicans, they tack these changes on that they want here onto must-pass legislation. Like in 2023, for example, when you had them trying to sneak in restrictions on everything from traffic to abortion to marijuana in DC. But then also you have to consider the stuff that's outside of Congress. He has the power to call up the DC National Guard and deploy it without local consent. Plus, that Home Rule Act, it actually gives him the power to temporarily take over the district's police department. And he can even order the mayor to provide the federal government with DC police services and, quote, special conditions of an emergency as he may deem necessary and appropriate. And all of that is before we even consider that local officials may just cave to the pressure. And that is something that we've seen them do here and there. And then I've got more news for you in just a minute. But first, here's an eye-opening stat. According to Pew Research, 32% of workers believe that AI could lead to fewer job opportunities in the future. While the jury's still out on the total net impact, companies like Microsoft and Google, they've already begun to shift. And that is why I think it's important to tell you about today's sponsor, Outskill. Because there's no question that companies of the future, they're going to be hiring people who understand AI. Those who understand it, those who can embrace it, and those who can build with it. And Outskill is the world's biggest AI education platform. And this very weekend, they're offering an AI mastermind that you don't want to miss. I've partnered with Outskill to give 1,000 of you free access. Expert mentors, 10 plus powerful tools. Show up and future-proof your career this Saturday and Sunday. It's August 9th and 10th from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time both days. Right, learn the stuff people actually use to get hired, promoted, or even launch their own thing. And while it normally costs $895, 1,000 of you will get free access, so definitely don't wait. Click that link in the description or scan the code on screen to secure your spot now. And they say that you'll also get $5,000 in bonus tools for attending both days. A custom AI toolkit, a monetization roadmap, and an AI prompt Bible to get you on your way. And then, next up in the news, we should talk about how Donald Trump's Epstein deflection campaign has actually worked. Not universally, but meaningfully, and I'll explain. We're starting with the fact that the Washington Post did an analysis of more than 500,000 social media posts and podcasts to see how the chatter about Jeffrey Epstein waxed and waned. And of all the content from over 450 right-wing influencers and politicians, the Post found 10,000 posts mentioning Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell during June and July. And while fewer than 1 in every 200 mentioned the pair during June, that ratio shot up to 1 in 20 the following month. It even reached as much as 1 in 12 on some days, and it peaked on July 18th when 1,000 posts mentioned Epstein or Maxwell. But that was also the day that Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard released documents purporting to show that the Obama administration conspired to keep Trump out of office in 2016 using Russiagate. And that story, it ended up really picking up traction on July 22nd and 23rd when she went on Fox News and gave a White House briefing detailing the alleged plot in her own words.
There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false.
And if that was an attempt to distract from Epstein, apparently it worked, because according to the Post, on July 19th, about twice as many posts mentioned Obama as mentioned Epstein or Maxwell. And by the 23rd, over 1 in 10 posts were about Obama, which was nearly 3 times as much as Epstein, all of which was really exemplified with Fox News. Not only did they mention Obama more than 3 times as much as Epstein over several days in July, they mentioned Epstein 5 times less than Newsmax, 11 times less than CNN, and 15 times less than MSNBC. I mean, hell, according to one report, over the course of a week at Fox, they mentioned Epstein 53 times and Sydney Sweeney 766. Right? And this is something we also saw reflected in politicians as well as online influencers. With some, like Sean Farash, even explicitly saying, the Russia hoax is more important than Epstein. I don't care who that offends. Though also, like others, they didn't even need the Obama conspiracy to lure them off the Epstein beat. They just needed their marching orders from Trump.
Let's continue with Trump. He says selfish people are trying to hurt MAGA. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, etc.? They created the Epstein files.
Right, and Dinesh D'Souza was a fun one to look at in particular because he posted about Epstein more than 500 times up until that point since 2022. But then suddenly he does this about face on July 14th in a video titled, "Is it time to move on from the Epstein files?" Right, and his answer was yes.
Because we've had a lot of these premises floating around. There's an Epstein list. He was running a blackmail operation. But many of these things, now that we think about it, were relying on information to be supplied, not information that actually existed.
But also with this, I'll say, even if the Epstein story is getting crowded out by other news, there's also several reasons to believe that this is going to keep surfacing. The first thing being that even as general Epstein talk has quieted down a bit, the post-analysis found that among people who are still hung up on Epstein, criticism of the White House has become more dominant. Right, and then the second reason being that this week, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed the Justice Department for the complete Epstein files, as well as 6 former attorneys general, 2 former FBI directors, and Bill and Hillary Clinton for depositions about their involvement in the Epstein case. And then finally, I'd say the third reason is that the White House is reportedly debating whether to release an audio recording and transcript of Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's 9-hour interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. And with that, you had 3 sources telling CNN that Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Blanche would meet at the VP's residence on Wednesday to discuss the matter. And actually, you had 2 officials adding that the materials could be made public as early as this week. And that delay reportedly stemming from disagreements about whether releasing them would just draw more attention to the story. But then with all that, it's not obvious, if all of that's going to satisfy the critics, especially when you have Trump saying stuff like this about Blanche's interview.
And I think he probably wants to make sure that, people that should not be involved or aren't involved are not hurt by something that would be very, very unfortunate, very unfair to a lot of people.
So then with that, you're seeing things like, according to CNN, there have also been internal discussions about Blanche holding a press conference or doing a high-profile interview, possibly with Joe Rogan. And so, all of a sudden there's this prospect of a senior White House official having to sit down for 2 or 3 hours of questioning about the case. And while Rogan, he's not exactly famous for challenging his guests or doing thorough research and prep for his interviews, he has recently been very critical of the White House.
Like, look, where's the Epstein files? Boo, can't find them. Don't exist. Like, they can get away with man.
The whole thing was nuts. And then he's like, well, we have a film. We're going to release that film. And the film has a minute missing from it.
Yeah.
Like, do you think we're babies? Like, what is this?
In the Blanche Maxwell interview, he's expressed skepticism that it uncovered anything important.
The smartest thing for her to do is to keep her fucking mouth shut, which is what she did.
Right.
They put her in a cushy prison where she could do yoga.
Which, to speak on that, last week, of course, it was reported that Maxwell got transferred from the low-security prison where she had been staying in Florida to a minimum-security prison in Texas. One that notably houses inmates convicted of nonviolent offenses and white-collar crimes, and it's even been called the cushiest federal detention facility in the country. With, in fact, the regional vice president for the Federal Prison Officers Union telling NBC, "You ever hear the old Club Fed they used to talk about? This is one of those places. It's really a great place to do your time if you're an inmate." Right, so you hear that, and then you hear a consultant for female female inmates explaining to the Washington Post that for the Florida prison, you're looking at double razor wire around the fence, trucks driving around it, cops with rifles, they're locking the doors of the housing units at night. But for the Texas prison, you're looking at dorms with bunk beds and suite housing, unlocked doors, fewer guards to inmates, freedom to roam the compound, and just one layer of razor wire fencing. And very importantly, not only did Maxwell's transfer reportedly happen just days after Blanche interviewed Maxwell, it's also against the Bureau of Prisons rules. Because convicted sex offenders, they have to be held in at least a low security level facility. And the only way that you get around that is to get a waiver from the Bureau's designation and sentence computation center. Right? And that, as you had experts telling the Post, that it is especially rare for sex offenders like her to get that treatment, and that even if she did cooperate with the DOJ, she would almost never get moved to a facility like the one in Texas. Now with that, I will say it's currently unclear why and how Maxwell got transferred, not to mention who ordered it, but you did have a reporter asking Trump about it.
Were you aware of, and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell that your Justice Department?
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
And do you believe that she is
It's not a very uncommon thing.
But really, whatever the reason for the transfer, people with knowledge of how the system works, they're just kind of flabbergasted by the news. For example, one former prison warden saying, "Someone gave special preference to Maxwell that, to my knowledge, no other inmate currently in the Federal Bureau of Prisons has received." And adding, "It's a country club. Inmates, if they have a sex offense, are not going to a place like that. Period. It's truly unheard of." And you're even seeing things like NBC obtaining screenshots of a private Facebook group for current and former federal prison staffers erupting in shock and outrage after hearing about Maxwell's transfer. With one writing, "As a retired BOP employee, this makes me sick," and another adding, "Since when are sex offenders allowed at the camp? I don't care who she snitched on, she's a damn human trafficker." With a former BOP chief of internal affairs calling the move a travesty of justice. Right, and all of this, it's coming after Virginia Giuffre's family expressed horror and disgust at the news, saying in a statement, "This is the justice system failing victims right before our eyes. The American public should be outraged by the special treatment afforded to a pedophile and a criminally charged child sex offender." And then, in quick but interesting news, a new Coast Guard report just came out, and it found that the Titan submersible implosion that killed 5 people, it was preventable. Right, and notably, they didn't mean like it would be preventable if you thought, hey, I shouldn't get into that sketchy ass tube to go down to see the Titanic. They were looking for key contributing factors to why it happened. Right, and according to reports, it largely came down to 6 things. Saying right off the bat the sub's design was flawed and it used questionable materials, as well as CEO Stockton Rush refusing to put the sub through a voluntary certification process, saying that it would stifle innovation. OceanGate's former director of marine operations was fired days after reporting concerns about the sub's carbon fiber hull in 2018. The sub's passengers were classified as mission specialists to avoid small passenger vessel regulations. OceanGate attempted to train sub pilots in a single day, and the sub was stored in an outdoor parking lot in Canada over the winter to save money. And even that, it doesn't touch on the toxic work environment stuff. But reportedly, there were firings and threats to fire people if they raised safety issues, with a report then including 17 safety recommendations that the Coast Guard says is aimed at strengthening oversight of submersible operations, improving coordination among federal agencies, and closing gaps in international maritime policy. And then I've got more news for you in a minute, but first, do you ever sit down and you feel yourself slide a little and realize, yeah, I wore the wrong underwear? Because I've worn today's sponsor, MeUndies, for years, and this summer, they've been a lifesaver. Their micromodal fabric, it's freakishly soft, it's lightweight, breathable, and somehow it stays cool even when your AC craps out. Oh wow, MeUndies has over 20 styles and 100 colors and prints to choose from. I'm talking briefs, boxers, cheeky cuts, bralettes, and the prints, flamingos, floaties, fruit with attitude. Seriously, I mean, there's something for everyone. Personally, right now, I'm rocking their tropical summer patterns, which may be TMI. And their breathe line, it's next level for summer. I mean, it wicks away sweat, fights odor, and it keeps things chill during workouts, errands, or just survive in the heat wave. MeUndies uses sustainably sourced materials and works with partners that care for their workers. Also, get this, if you're not happy with your first pair of undies, it's on MeUndies. With 30 million pairs sold and over 90,000 5-star reviews, MeUndies has become a summer essential for a reason. I wear MeUndies, I think you should too. And right now, you can get a deal. Up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/PhilipDeFranco and enter promo code PhilipDeFranco. It's MeUndies.com/PhilipDeFranco, promo code PhilipDeFranco for up to 50% off. MeUndies. Comfort that's made for summer. And then, next up, in huge international news, tens of thousands of people trapped in a besieged city in Sudan are facing famine. That is what you have the UN warning this week, and it's just one of the reasons that the situation in the country is considered the world's largest humanitarian crisis. But starting with this city under siege, it's called El Fasher. It's the capital of the state of North Darfur, and it's the last major city there still under the Sudanese government's control. And the rebel group known as the RSF, they've been trying to take control of it for more than a year, during which time the UN has been unable to deliver food food by land. So you have things like, for example, in June, an ambush on what would have been the first aid convoy to reach the city since early 2024, resulting in the deaths of 5 humanitarian workers. And so with almost no aid getting in, the roughly 300,000 people remaining in the city, they're dealing with increasingly desperate conditions. With, for example, the World Food Program regional director for Eastern and Southern Africa saying that everyone in the city is facing a daily struggle to survive. But also, you could say pretty much the same for people all over the country. You've got the UN describing the broader hunger and displacement crisis in Sudan as unprecedented, and for good reason. Since April of 2023, the war has killed tens of thousands of people, displaced millions, and left tens of millions facing hunger. It's also the only place in the world where famine conditions have been confirmed in multiple locations. And in fact, last year, the UN declared famine in the displacement camps surrounding El Fasher. It was expected that starvation would take hold of the city itself by May of this year, and really there was only a lack of hard data keeping an official famine declaration from happening. And this, it ties back to the United States, because what's happening here, it's making things worse there. And what I'm talking about are the recent cuts to USAID, right? The U.S. Agency for International Development. And in general, you've had experts saying that the impact could be devastating. A study published in The Lancet, for example, found that in the absence of USAID, 14 million more people would die worldwide in the next 5 years. And a third of that 14 million would be children under the age of 5. And it appears that Sudan could be hit especially hard, because according to data from the UN, the agency provided 44% of the world's humanitarian funding for Sudan in 2024. And in fact, you had an emergency logistics coordinator for Doctors Without Borders saying that Sudan, it's become a case study for the impact of USAID cuts. And that is, you have people like the former US Special Envoy to the country, whose role has been left vacant under the Trump administration, saying that the cuts, they've already come with a body count. But also, I will note, it's not just the US. The UK, Germany, Canada, and several other countries have also cut foreign aid over the past year. All while, like, when it comes to this war, it seems like there's just no end in sight. Back in March, you had the RSF withdrawing from Khartoum, the national capital, and there was some hope that it could be a turning point in the war. But then, just a month later, the group declared its own parallel government, stoking fears that the conflict was actually just about to get a whole lot worse. For example, the Horn of Africa director at the International Crisis Group telling the New York Times, the RSF appears to think this move will increase its own legitimacy and leverage, but saying more likely it will only make the war even harder to end and Sudan even harder to piece back together. And to that point, just last week, you had the RSF and allied groups announcing who would be in charge of their new government and issuing a very nice-sounding statement saying they had renewed their, quote, commitment to building an inclusive homeland in a new secular, democratic, decentralized, and voluntarily unified Sudan founded on principles of freedom, justice, and equality. The thing is there, like the RSF, it has faced allegations including murder, rape, ethnic cleansing, and even genocide. With something to know here being that the origins of the group actually lie in the militias that perpetrated the Darfur genocide of the early 2000s. So that is also the side of the Sudanese government has been accused of war crimes as well. And all of this is, it's not happening inside of a vacuum, right? All this violence, all this suffering, it's being helped along in part by outside forces, namely foreign nations sending money, weapons, or even people into the country. This has included Sudan's neighbors like Libya and Egypt. It's even included Russia and Ukraine. And most notoriously, it has included the UAE. In the United Arab Emirates specifically has been accused of supplying weapons, drones, and other military assistance to the RSF. And in fact, just this week, Sudan accused the country of sending Colombian mercenaries to fight alongside the RSF. And this has actually been a point of contention here in the US. You see, the US has authorized massive weapon sales to the UAE, and we've actually seen some members of Congress trying to block those sales to protest its role in the war. Though we'll see what happens there, because, for so long, this conflict has been overshadowed by all the other horrible shit that's been going on in the world. But then, finally today, let's end with a congratulations and talk about y'all's comments on yesterday's show. Starting with congratulations to Michael P., SeatGeek's latest weekly winner who just scored $500 in tickets. Michael's saying he's still deciding between seeing The Outsiders or Happy Ending on Broadway. For the rest of you, that's right. SeatGeek is still giving away $500 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. Imagine if you dare being the next winner and snagging $500 towards seeing your favorite artist, sporting event, or play. There's like over 70,000 events to choose from. And all you gotta do is just add code PDS to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize, no purchase necessary. But with that said, let's talk about y'all's comments on yesterday's show in some commentary. Like the people in that crowd, so many of the comments were people being outspoken about that town hall. With Brody saying that town hall is hard to watch. The people you run for are telling you you're betraying them for money and you're still excusing it to their faces. With then Stench of Justice writing, quote, fascists don't hold town halls and take questions. Immediately announces this is the last in-person town hall they plan on holding due to the negative response. With that, then getting replies like he couldn't handle the facts and we need a law making this mandatory as well as making attendance records / activity logs public. You also had a lot of people grabbing onto the specific healthcare moment, with some saying I was heartened to hear the crowd at the town hall yell yes when asked if unemployed people should get health care.
Do you think that people who are 28 years old that can work and refuse to work should get free health care?
And Ava writing, watching this as a European, I'm shocked this man has the nerve to say that a 28-year-old that is able to work but is unemployed does not deserve free healthcare. Basically, if someone is in between jobs and gets hit by a car, maybe on their way to a job interview even, they're supposed to just die from their injuries or have a debt to pay off for the rest of their life. Do you not believe in human rights? And finally with this, you had Sadornala saying, Mike was not ready for that absolute flood of hate. Good on the people of Nebraska for having teeth. So there you had some people saying that's not teeth, that's quite literally all bark, no bite, which ends up sounding like a weird criticism, like they should be violent. But here's what I'll say. It is important to have bark and bite. So if you're someone that watched those clips and your reaction was somewhere between fuck yeah, or you're one of those people that does the snaps, enjoy the bark, embrace the bark, but also bite in recommending and encouraging those around you that have similar ideals to vote. Find where you can help locally, canvass, get people registered to vote, call bank. You know, it's not one or the other, it's a two-step. But on that note, I'm a two-step out of here. Thank you for watching. If you're looking for more news, you might have missed last night's show, or I got that brand new podcast for you. Link to that in the description. But as always, I love yo face. Stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.